The unleashed power of the atom has changed everything save our modes of thinking, and we thus drift towards unparalleled catastrophe. That was Albert Einstein writing about the creation, the invention of the nuclear weapon. And in a sense he's right, and in a sense he's not. And I'll dive into why I'm saying that. So, yes, since the creation of the atomic bomb, the detonation of the atomic bomb during World War II in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we have seen a continual advancement of the weaponry, right? Many countries, ourselves, Russia, and others, continue to develop larger and more lethal nuclear weapons. So in that sense, yes, Einstein is right. We are drifting toward unparalleled catastrophe, but at the same time, it's been almost 80 years since World War II ended. The nuclear bombs were dropped, and none have gone off. So in that sense, yes, there was success in the idea the weapon would be so horrible that no one would ever want to use it again. So I would have to give credit in that sense, as no one has used it in 80 years. And certainly we hope it's another 80 years before anyone thinks of using one again. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the world we live in. There's a thing called the Doomsday Clock, and in January of 2023, at the beginning, they moved it to the closest level to Doomsday. I think it's 90 seconds to Doomsday. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, right? And that's really what they do. The Doomsday Clock people, they look at everything going on in the world and say, how safe is the world? How dangerous is the world? And they felt in January, the world is a dangerous place, right? The main thing I would say that stops total nuclear war is the idea of assured mutual destruction, right? Mutual assured destruction, MAD, in that any country that starts shooting nuclear bombs, others would retaliate, right? And you would have this total apocalypse, nuclear apocalypse. And deep down, I don't think anyone wants that. Certainly no sane person wants that. There are some insane people in this world, but no sane person would want that. Adding to that, we're seeing a world where there's plenty of other weapons that have developed since the creation of the nuclear bomb, cyber warfare, those kind of things that we are seeing used all the time, right? So there's conventional war, and we still have that. We still see that. There's plenty of conventional wars going on right now. But we also have things like cyber war, right? We just saw a grid down in Israel not that long ago, allegedly because of cyber war from Iran. Can't prove it. That's just my understanding of what happened. So in that sense, the threat of nuclear war, as much as is real, as much as it continues to persist 80 years after the creation of the bomb, the world is no safer than it was. It really is what some countries would refer to as a last ditch, right? Russia has said that if there's an existential threat to the country, if they think we're going to wipe Russia off the map, they would respond, right? And Israel has a similar policy that if they feel that the existence of Israel as a country is threatened, they have nuclear bombs. So they're out there. It has been a balance, right? A balance of power. So I want to jump in on some of the myths, right? Myth versus fact. And I'm getting this from Nuclear War Survival Skills from Crescent and Kearney. Great book. If you're an apocalypse nerd, jump in, lean in. There's a ton of great information. Highly recommend the book. I'm just taking and sharing little bits out, right? If you look at Hollywood, if you look at what you see in the movies, what you read in the apocalypse fiction, a lot of that is myth, and a lot of that has spun this sort of urban legends, urban fallacies around what would happen if a nuclear weapon was detonated. Don't get me wrong, it would be horrible, right? Absolutely horrible. It's something we hope never happens, but it's probably not as bad as you see on TV, right? Certainly a lot of the movies don't really make an effort to show maybe something more realistic, right? It's always horrible. It's always devastating, as we want that image to be, right? We just, you don't want anyone to think, hey, nuclear war wouldn't be so bad. And certainly I'm not saying that. But one of the myths I'm going to bring up here is fallout radiation penetrates everything. There's no escaping its deadly effects, right? So that's a myth. Doesn't matter what happens, the radiation is going to penetrate and everyone's going to get irradiated, which is bad. You don't want radiation poisoning. High levels of radiation poisoning can kill you. Something we talked about in the last video is lower levels of radiation poisoning, say below 6 rads, continuous, your body can't heal. There is some healing power there. So it's not to say that a moment, immediately you get radiation, you're going to die. If you're close enough to the explosion, if you hit high doses of radiation, certainly that's not good. You would, but smaller bits, is a different story. But so the myth is radiation penetrates everything. Doesn't matter what you're going to do. We're all going to die. The fact is, yes, some gamma radiation is going to penetrate no matter what, some level. If you're close enough to nuclear explosion, the gamma radiation can penetrate. The reality behind it is if you have a good shelter, right, depending on the shelter, and we'll get into that a little bit, the levels of gamma radiation might be less than you expect to get just from getting x-rays in normal life. So yes, the fact behind it is, yes, the gamma radiation some level will penetrate. The question is how much, and that really depends on your shelter, right? Whether you have a fallout shelter. I'm not saying everyone needs to dig a fallout shelter. There was a time in American history that was a very popular activity. A lot of people had fallout shelters. It's less of a thing in America right now, but there are a lot of countries out there that do have shelters, do have fallout shelters, and that's that maybe not a bad idea, right? We don't know. We'll have to see what happens. So the actual level of radiation, as I said, is less, right? We'll into that. So in building a fallout shelter or selecting a shelter, if you're in a city, as we said, nuclear bomb goes off, you got to get to shelter, right? First thing you want to do is lay on the ground, cover your eyes because there's going to be a bright flash. But after the bright flash, after the explosion, there is a period of time before the fallout starts coming down, and that's when you're going to want to move. You're going to want to get into shelter. So in building a fallout shelter, every 3.6 inches of earth or every 2.4 inches of concrete cuts the levels of gamma radiation in half. So you have a halving effect. 3 inches of dirt, it's not that much, right? Maybe, guys are horrible at guessing, but 3.6 inches isn't that much. Certainly concrete's even better. So just 18 inches, a foot and a half of dirt cuts gamma radiations by a factor of 32. So you basically go from a level 32 gamma radiation, 18 inches of dirt, it's a 1, right? And if you had 3.5 more inches, that cuts that in half again. So fallout shelters do work. Shelter does work. You would want to get to shelter, right? And that's something we've talked about before. Certainly, if you want to build a fallout shelter, you can. And if you're curious on how to build a fallout shelter, and once again, we're going to advertise this book because I'm borrowing some of the ideas from the book. It actually gives instructions, and we may get into that a little bit, on all the different types of fallout shelters you can build and how to design them. So once again, it's a great book if you're an apocalypse nerd like I am, if you're interested in actual real factual information about nuclear war, get the book, right? I think it's good information. It's always good to have books. But it is survivable, right? Assuming you're not in ground zero, right? If you're right there where the nuke goes off, not such a great thing. But if you have a decent shelter, something like nuclear war, as horrible as it would be, is survivable for a lot of people. So I hope that helps out. We're trying to dig in, give some information. As always, thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.